So I'm talking to Paul McLaney, and you are the musical director for WOW for 2018.
That's correct, yeah.
How did you get this job? How did you get the gig?
I was approached by the director, Malia Johnston, for a variety of reasons. Obviously, a composer myself, but through my other roles working in publishing and licensing, I have a strong network of composers as friends, but also as clients and as colleagues. And then a further understanding of the requirements for what the music would be used for. There's the show, but then there's the filming of the show, so the synchronization and things within that. So it's basically navigating that space on behalf of the musicians and on behalf of WOW.
So I came to the dress rehearsal the other night. I noticed there was still filming in that. Is that for the multimedia, or was that just for the show tonight?
That was just for the preview, because obviously the official opening is the next night. So gathering footage of the show is easy to do on that preview night. So you don't really want Steadicams wandering around the stage every night. But it's a way of capturing footage for later synchronization and for advertising and archival purposes. Really, a lot of the awards are given to the winners, and those winning costumes then go into the museum. And there's an audiovisual component of the museum display as well. And then when those pieces sometimes travel offshore, there's a further audiovisual component.
So when you're compiling the music, is your role so often musical directors tend to read from a script, from a score off and things like this, but this is more a curation exercise, is that right?
It's the easiest way to describe it. It's more like being a record producer. So the plan this year was to have a fully composed show. No existing music. There are 3 existing songs in the show, which were we knew that from the very, very beginning, because they have a particular task to complete in the show.
And one at the end is a well-known one, of course.
Which
we won't spoil. But
no, so there's 3 songs there, but I'd say about 96 or 97% of the show is completely and utterly composed by the 7 different composers that have been engaged. And that's a backwards and forwards process with the director. Obviously, the strange thing about WOW is you don't know what the costumes look like until very late in the process, because they don't arrive until then.
Yeah, so very good point. How do you compose? Do you compose as per the bracket, from the description of the bracket?
Yeah, so there's 7 sections this year, including retrospective, because this is obviously the 30th anniversary. They're finally having a look back, which doesn't happen very often. Always moving forward, but in the 7 different sections, you build a world. So obviously retrospective has a feeling of nostalgia and sentiment, and actually you try to avoid sentiment. The danger in nostalgia is sentiment. That's the enemy of nostalgia.
Yeah.
So you want this magical, dreamlike quality to be established. What you're really doing in each section is establishing the emotional landscape of a world which can invite the garments that are going to. The invitation to those garments, really. So with the open section, it's very much about the night sky and Aurora Borealis, and
the Alice in Wonderland theme is quite in there, and I did notice there was some trip back to the earlier Oceania type orchestration that was very much recognised as part of the show.
Of the WOW thing,
Yeah, exactly. But then it moves on, and then there are other sections like the kind of the microscope section, and the amoeba section.
That's one of my favourites, just because it's you really want to feel like you're in a petri dish. So it's it's super hi-fi. The references for that were things like John Hopkins and Moderat, and very much the electronica of now, rather than Jean-Michel Jarre and Vangelis and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it dates very fast, doesn't it?
Well, it's the thing about Jean-Michel Jarre and Vangelis is it does sound futuristic, because it was the first time that music was heard, so it did feel like it was an invitation to the future. But there is some amazing electronica being created now. We have the technologies just. So I think Mahuya Bridgman Cooper, who composed Microscope, I think that's a stunning piece of work. I listen to it for pleasure. And then then we have the Avant-Garde, which is oboes and cellos, and there's a 120 person choir. That's an Auckland Youth Choir.
So tell me about that. How did that come about? That's a commission piece.
Yeah, it's all commissioned. So that actually the avant-garde section, which is what we're talking about, was actually composed by WOW's long-time sound man Shane Clayton, who put up his hand, and he's been working on the show for 24 years, I think, and so he knows it intimately, and he's a great composer, and so we work together to evolve a piece of music. So you get the thing with these days, you can get orchestral music to a pretty high level just in the box, and then you farm out the parts. So we brought in like the principal oboe player for the Auckland Philharmonic, and my suggestion was that the peak of the third piece wasn't big enough. We needed to go bigger, so we brought in a choir and wrote some choir parts, and that's really been my job. As I say, it's more like a record producer, so you got a theme, but it's my job to sort of then turn up the theatricality and turn it into a piece that suits wow, because it's a very specific language, and because there's no narrative, music does quite a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of letting the audience be instructed, emotionally.
Yeah, that must have been interesting. No narrative. There's no story around. There's stories. I did notice there are stories around the individual garments which those models wearing it. And obviously, they've done some research and they feel it in a certain way. There's one specific case of it's kind of somebody holding a milkshake and like a 1950s type. Sort of server, exactly, for that period. So that's a really easy one. But then there's some things where there's no description at all.
Yeah, well, in that
they have to interpret that.
Yeah, well, I think the brief that goes out for each of the sections is really the same brief that the composers and myself follow to try and create. Like Under the Microscope is all about cells and tiny insects, and so you see a lot of insect type qualities, and nanotechnology sort of pieces, and then obviously reflective surfaces. There's an amazing jest that pings right towards the end, and light firing in every direction. And so that's and the brief for that one was like you're falling into a parallel dimension of like crazy carnies. That's why we have the aerialists and the circus performers, and
which is another element again. Normally they tend to sort of do Cirque du Soleil type stuff, of which you've got one of the judges to this time. I guess they would have appreciated that from some. Did they have any input? The judges and any of the others, or is it entirely you?
It's entirely
and you and the director.
Myself and the director. Great lighting guy, Jeff. Rowan on AV, Ron Pierce on AV. But Malia Johnston is really the mastermind of it all. Yeah.
Oh wow! So, and then some of the other segments. There's I guess a Pacifica one in there.
Aotearoa.
Yeah, Aotearoa. But I kind of felt that there was more than just your traditional Maori sort of elements. It was very broad.
Very broad, with Tongan and Samoan influences in there as well.
Who composed that?
Paddy Free.
Oh right.
Yeah. And then so it was instrumental for a while, and then we decided that.
So he's in New York at the moment, isn't he?
He's just got back.
He's just got back.
Louis Pottinger-Brown. They came on. They were on the preview. They were here on the preview night.
Oh right. Oh awesome.
So he composed a fair bit of that in New York actually. So he's probably getting homesick.
Yeah.
But so we had the instrumental bed, and then we decided to extend some of those pieces into waiata, into song. So I set them some old Māori proverbs to melodies, and then brought in Bellick and did a session, and we're pretty pleased with the way the songs came out. And
was that Bella that was up high, suspended? I thought it was. She's got a phenomenal voice as it is.
And she comes back, and it's really powerful, and then she does this sort of wailing thing, and the last track that she sings, and it's really because of the garment. Again, I don't want to ruin any surprises. Because of the garment that's there, my instruction to her was like, she has such a facility with her voice, such a power, and such an emotional range that it should be like a wailing for all of like a vicarious experience for people who can't do that for themselves, and she could do it for everybody else. And so she really goes there. It's
like
I get shivers every night.
Like the timbre from the conch shell when you welcome, or something like that. That kind of ongoing drone sound, but it reminded me a bit of the waiata that women sing when you first come on the marae. It seemed like that.
Yeah, definitely, and all of those are influences into the choice of having that occur. And then with the special effects that are happening around that, it gets pretty pretty epic. And then Tupe, there's a huge dance at the end there you would have noticed with like lots of moving parts and lots of human beings. And that's,
I know.
and that's a pretty.
How did that
epic
How do you
experience.
put that together? That's a choreographer's job.
Yes, so
Yep.
Melia worked with Tupe, whose name I won't even try and pronounce, and she came on board as guest choreographer for that specific
Right.
piece. As she's of Samoan heritage, and yeah, that it's months and months of rehearsals really.
Right, and then the avant-garde one again was, I remember that as being like washes of sound, because I guess the avant-garde stuff that's on stage is just so out there, and
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of
you don't want to
quasi-
define it, do you?
No, and it's sort of quasi-religious in a way. Like it's very the way it's set up is very ceremonial. So it's sort of neoclassical in terms of its music aesthetic, and so it feels very churchy in places. So there are church organs and boy sopranos and choirs, and so it's all lots of fun to do.
Yeah, for some reason it reminded me of that scene in the kitchen of The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and His Lover. If you've seen that film, with the little boy sings and it just fills everything.
Oh yeah, it's,
that reminded me of that. There's a couple of scenes in there.
Well, there's a great thing about this whole project is just how diverse it is. You can go from that to modern electronica to neoclassical. Like Claire Cowan's opening music for retrospective is beautiful. She actually wrote the music for the puppet of light that you see there as well.
Oh yes, with the large puppet and then the little one underneath, and
Yeah,
that's sort
it's
of
a very heartbreaking.
It's like a
piece of
father
music.
and son scene, wasn't it? In
Oh,
a way,
and
it was heartbreaking. Yeah,
well, it's very beautiful. And and obviously, we had many cracks at trying to get that piece of music just right, because you don't want it to be schmaltzy, but you just want to press some buttons.
Which is interesting. How do you do that when you haven't actually seen? Normally, if you write music for a movie or something, you can see the rushes, you can get a
Well, the
feel for it.
The movie's in your head. Just have to imagine everything.
Yeah.
And so we have lots of like storyboards and proof of concept and drawings and then you just have to close your eyes and imagine what would that look like and how should it sound.
Which is a very broad brush. And then right towards the end, we won't spoil it, but there's definitely a Hollywood style moment toward the end there,
and that's
an old school one, and that must draw on things it did draw on things we knew.
Yeah, there are the two songs in there that we know, and but the rest of that, it's 19 minutes, I think, that bit.
Yeah.
And about 5 minutes of it are existing pieces of music. There's a brand new song in there called Dancing the Bazaar.
Yeah. Which I really enjoyed, by the way. Who wrote that?
Myself and Bruce Lynch.
Oh, right.
So Bruce Lynch was a composer for Bazaar Bra, and there's not many people who can write big band arrangements. I mean, that's really does separate them out from the boys.
Yeah.
It sounds, we had a lot of fun recording that, and Merv Thomas, who played trombone, he's 80 years old, and the other guy, basically I think the average age was about 65 to 75.
Yeah. And it really swings, that one. That
was the most worked.
Yeah, I could see by the models that they're really enjoying that, because I guess it's quite intimidating to come out basically with no top on and you're wearing this strange outfit.
Yeah, you got to take it one way. You got to embrace it, or you probably wouldn't walk on.
Yeah.
But no, I mean I think there was about 12 2B pencils that were destroyed in that, and a small forest of trees. The manuscript is about that high.
Oh my goodness.
And that was recorded. I mean, we started the recording process in December last year. So I mean, that's a long time.
Yeah. Now tell me about the recording process. Did you have to travel to particular locations? Was it stuff that was recorded and then provided to you? How did that work? How do you curate all these disseminate bits all together to make sure you've got everything you need? One
step at a time. I mean, we were majority of the composers this year were based in Auckland, which is where I live. So so we get things up to because before you spend the money on in the studio and hiring musicians, you sort of need a proof of concept that's there's no point recording something and then not using it.
Yeah.
So we'd get things as close as possible in MIDI type situations, and then when everyone was happy with where it was going, the director and the powers that be, then I'd move into the studio. So we used the lab, and we used Roundhead Studios, Neil Finn's place, and had people like Amalia May, who's like New Zealand's best violinist, come in and really virtuosic. I mean, to be in the presence of real virtuosos is exciting and humbling and great.
I love the way that they just look at something and just get it and
immediately
play, and they're about the detail, not actually playing the notes or anything. They know that already.
Yeah, no, that's exactly where we were talking about what finger to use.
Yeah.
Because they've got 4 choices. And you know, and so even the big band stuff, you know, those guys have been loving that music for 50, 60 years, and so we put the charts up on the board and it wouldn't even rehearse, just 1, 2, 3, 4, bang.
Did they ever bring up any challenges in that situation and say, hey, there's a little bit too much like something else we've played in the past, or it's too familiar, or they weren't worried about that?
No, I mean, I think, you know, that genre is a familiar genre. It's like folk music, you know, it's or the blues, you know. No one's going to criticize the blues for being a bit too familiar. You know,
True.
You got 5 notes and the truth.
Wasn't that Bono that said that, or something
3
like
chords,
that?
And you know, and it's a lot of those, you know, like something like a lot of those early big band Glenn Miller type things, they're sort of like arpeggios and things, you know, but they're swung. I think this is really the first time that music really swung, because when you write music, you know, when you're writing it down, you can't actually, you have to write it straight.
Yeah.
You know, so if it was going da 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 da, on the page it goes da 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 da, but there's an instruction at the top that says swung.
And you have to know what that means.
And you have to, you know, and that's why you don't hear orchestra swing. They just don't.
They just play what they read. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very hard for an orchestra to groove.
Yeah.
So, but you know, for a big band, Glenn Miller,
kind
of bassy sort of setup, it's very easy
because there's a number of unwritten beats in there that they're actually, you're counting as sort of a 3 and then drop, and the 3 and then drop. Yeah.
So it's like almost like 3 over 4.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, which is hard, and I know things like, you know, Dave Brubeck who wrote 5/4 time. Or how
well, actually, Paul
Paul
Desmond, actually, the saxophone player for his quartet, wrote Take 5.
Yeah.
And I was a Jethro Tull fan growing up, so there's Living in the Past. That's da da ba da 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 ba da ba da da da. But you know, but even in you know, I think all of the sections have got bars of 6, and you know, and some. There's no 7. Oh, maybe there is 1 bar of 7 in Avant-Garde.
Yeah.
As you would expect.
So I'm suspecting that a number of the models, just looking at the way they carried themselves and things, that are possibly dancers. Some of them, many of them are.
Oh yeah,
And so how do they read the music? Because they need everything to be nice and clipped, so you can get to the end of a section and stop and turn and all that.
Lots of rehearsals.
They're looking, looking for that direction and the music itself.
The reason we started the process in December so was that we could have finished music for rehearsals in June. You know, so that's. So you're not, you know, the worst thing is to set choreography and then try and write music to match the choreography. That's it's insane. You have a hernia. But you know, so as much detail in the musical composition as we can give by that rehearsal start date, and then we do feed in extra layers and little nuanced moments that can heighten, you know, a moment. But yeah,
which is great. And now a couple of last questions. You've been doing this stuff for a while now, and I know you were doing things with the Globe in Auckland.
Yep.
It's the Black Orchestra, was it?
The Black Quartet, yeah.
The Black Quartet, that's right.
Yeah.
Are you going to do more again? I see they're rolling back for another season.
Yeah, well, I came from Sydney to do this, and so the Pop-Up Globes popped up in Sydney.
Yep.
With Macbeth, Midsummer Night's Dream, Merchant of Venice, and Comedy of Errors.
Yep.
And right before I saw you, I was on a Skype call talking about Taming of the Shrew, and I've written the music already for Richard III. And then we start on Hamlet and Measure for Measure.
And how do they compare? Are you writing them in the moment, or are you writing them in the direction?
Different directors on each show, so but you know, the thing about the Pop-Up Globe is that we do it traditionally, so there's no amplification, so that does dictate to a certain extent musical choices in terms, you know, things that actually work in that space, like trumpets and bagpipes. And
does it change the timing because you can see the actors not quite where they need to be and that kind of thing?
Well, you're using, because there's no comms either. It's a bit like the drummer or a trumpet player in an army back in the day. You know, that's actually cueing things. But you know, like with Richard III, we were going very traditional, sort of Gabrielli trumpet. That's 2 trombones and a trumpet. You know, be very lush, and I've had very detailed conversations with the director Mars Gregory around that, so I've been able to compose those in advance of rehearsals.
Wow.
But with Taming of the Shrew, I think, you know, a lot of that will be off the cuff. I mean, some of the best songs, some of my favourite songs for Pop-Up Globe I've written literally on demand in the room, there and then.
Wow.
But you know, because I did that album Play On, where I set the soliloquies to music, it's really developed a wonderful affinity for me with his language and the ability to set that musically. I mean, when I do that, I can almost see it singing off the page.
Yeah, well, it's a very lyrical style
Oh.
that he's got there, so you're just asking to do it.
Oh, it's gagging
Yeah.
for it, yeah.
Well, which is great. Yeah, that's wonderful. Hey, thanks so much for talking to us.
Oh, thank you, Tim.
And good luck for the season. Have you, apart from the Globe stuff, have you got any regular albums planned?
Yes, I've got a regular album coming out on the 1st of February called The Old Traditions, and it's a collaboration with a pianist called Gramsci. So I've done a whole bunch of albums as the Impending Adorations.
Rashi's in Wellington, actually.
Yes, yeah. So we the Impending Adorations is very much like a burial sort of Eno-esque soundscapey. They're all songs, but they're very electronic. And I was really, I thought I reached a really powerful emotional state in those recordings. But one of the things about electronica is it can be successful based on its aesthetic. You know, rather than is it a good song or is it just a sound? Does it sound good?
Yeah.
So the instinct with the Old Traditions was to take songs right back to their original. You know, what the instrument of popular music for the last 500 years is the piano. So to write an album for just piano and voice. So it's 10 songs just for piano and voice.
Wow.
And yeah, we recorded it a while, but I've been so busy doing all these other things that. And I'm really proud of it, and I need to give it its due, and it needs to have its have the right attention, you know. So once I've got through the Globe, then I can give myself the time and attention that the Old Traditions needs.
Yeah, I thought it would be fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah, and all the best for the season. Break a
Thank you
leg,
very
I guess, is it?
Cheers, Tim.